In the story of Jujutsu Kaisen, there's not many other characters with more latent potential than Megumi Fushiguro. Sadly though, we never get to see him rise to that level we know he can reach, because having your body taken for the last arc of the story just isn't optimal for growth. So today I'll be taking the questions into my own hands, and I'll try to explain to the best of my ability how strong Megumi could be if he had reached his full potential. I do want you to keep in mind though, that this is all hypothetical because we don't know how strong Megumi would be due to the story ending so quickly and Gege not giving him enough fights. But if you haven't already though, I do recommend subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button, as it helps me out greatly and you get more videos like this in the near future. Before we talk about what Megumi would look like with his full potential unlocked, let's take a look at how strong Megumi is currently. Megumi in chapter 1 alone is already a grade 2 sorcerer in his first year, meaning he could take up missions on his own, as even Inumaki in volume 0 was able to go on solo missions while being grade 2. Megumi then, a few chapters later, runs into the first finger bearer with Yuji, and it's so strong that it scares the two from even wanting to move out of fear for their life. Megumi then runs away from it to go save Nobara, and I want you to keep this interaction in mind for a little later, because it's important for Megumi's growth. He then goes up against Three Finger Sukuna, and while he does get completely destroyed, he takes some punches from Sukuna, which shows some level of durability for this early version of Megumi, but nonetheless still gets destroyed. He soon after has a fight with Todo, but he loses so badly that there's not really much to bring up. 1 month later, he has a small fight with Kamo, where he shows off his newly tamed Max Elephant that he claims he can only summon once a day due to the amount of cursed energy it takes. The fight then gets interrupted by Hanami, and in the Hanami fight, he shows he can damage a special grade cursed spirit, arguably one of the most durable, with Divine Dog Totality. This Hanami being a disaster curse who is the most durable out of the 4 disaster curses, even being able to tank black flashes and multiple playful cloud hits, and even survives after being partly hit with hollow purple. In this fight as well, he does multiple combo attacks with Maki and shows relativity to her in combat. Megumi's fight against the second finger bearer is one of, if not the most important fight for him in the series, because this is the moment his mindset seems to shift. Megumi the entire series up to this point only fought basically to sacrifice himself rather than to grow. He ran away from the first finger bearer not only out of fear, but also to go save Nobara instructed by Yuji. Then he's asked by Sukuna why did he run away from it, and gets told he basically could have won. He really starts to think about Sukuna's words and his own mindset going into fight. This causes him to seek out Gojo to train him, but Gojo tells Megumi that he doesn't know how to bring out his best. Like in the baseball game, Megumi bunted so Nobara could advance, but people like himself and Yuji swing for home runs every time. He then says a sacrifice bunt isn't bad, and that baseball is a team sport, but being a Jujutsu sorcerer is a solo sport where no matter how many allies you have around you, you always die alone. Gojo explains that Megumi only judges himself and matches people around him rather than imagining a stronger version of himself because of the ace Megumi has being Mahoraga, holding him back from his own growth, because every time he's in a tough position, he doesn't try to think of a stronger version of his own self. He could just sacrifice himself and use his ace. Finally, Gojo tells him that dying to win and risking death to win is 2 different things. One mindset props up the pathway for growth as a sorcerer, and the other just leads to death. This entire lecture comes back to Megumi in his fight against a way stronger finger bearer than the one that made him and Yuji so scared they couldn't move. Megumi then adapts his new mindset, opens his imagination, and pictures a future stronger version of himself in his head, instantly learning how to do an incomplete domain expansion as a first year student. This being something that is unheard of out of a sorcerer this young, and then goes on to beat the special grade finger bearer by himself. The Shibuya arc comes around, and Megumi seems to have grown even more, being able to keep up with Yuji in combat and even combine attacks with him, even though he comments how difficult it is to keep up alongside Yuji. Mind you, this is a Yuji who had hit multiple black flashes before, fought alongside Todo, and had grown a lot stronger according to Gojo after looking at Yuji with the 6 eyes. This shows a lot of growth for Megumi, because Megumi right before the Goodwill arc got absolutely blitzed and destroyed by Todo physically. But not only has he seemingly grown in physical strength since his fight against the Finger Bear, but he also shows the ability to be able to use his Shikigami more efficiently, as he summons Max Elephant, Divine Dog, and many other Shikigami throughout his fights against Toji and Jiro. Not to mention, he had an entire domain clash with Dagon as well in the middle of these two fights, while before he could only summon Max Elephant once because it took too much of his cursed energy, to now he can do all of this and do a domain clash in one night. Leading into the Culling games, his next and final big fight, at least before Sukuna takes his body, is of course against Reggie Star. Against Reggie, he shows a lot more variety and finesse in how he uses the 10 Shadows technique in battle by doing things he's never done before. Like inside his domain, he makes basically shadow clones of himself to fight alongside the real him, almost like he's Naruto, even forcing Charles to say that due to Megumi's increased function of his technique inside the domain, it's actually worse than a sure hit domain, which is a crazy statement considering that we know how dangerous the sure hit domains are in the series. Unfortunately, this is the last time Megumi himself has his own fight before Sukuna takes his body, so after this, it's basically speculation for what Megumi could become. Before I do go over how strong Megumi would be, I want to go over the 10 Shadows itself and into how Sukuna used it because it gives us a good gauge at just how strong the technique could be in the right hands. Now I'm not saying Megumi could ever do the technique to that level, but seeing what it could do at its best I think would help for visualizing Megumi's peak. The very first time Sukuna uses the technique, we see him summon his version of Nue, being a skyscraper-sized bird that can summon multiple strokes of lightning that even someone like Maki can't dodge and is forced to block with her arms. Between this fight and the Yorozu fight, Sukuna manages to tame seemingly all 10 of the Shikigami, even Mahoraga, as we see him use Round Deer, being a giant deer that can use RCT to heal its user, Piercing Ox, an ox that charges in a straight line, and the longer it charges, the stronger it gets, managing to damage Yorozu in her insect armor, Yorozu being one of the strongest people in the verse, and he also uses Max Elephant to crush her insect armor completely, and finally Mahoraga to destroy her domain from the outside with his blade coated in positive cursed energy. His final fight where he utilizes the 10 Shadows, we see him use Mahoraga to neutralize Gojo's infinity and even taught Sukuna the World Slash. We also see him use a new Shikigami being Agito, which is a humanoid version of Nue combined with Great Serpent, Tiger Funeral, and Round Deer by Gojo's words, allowing it to be able to heal itself with RCT and use lightning. Although it not being as strong as Mahoraga, as Gojo just straight up says it can't keep up in the fight, it still seems to be one of the stronger Shikigamis we've seen. Sukuna basically took every Shikigami that Megumi had and amped them up to their max due to his reserve of cursed energy being more than double of Yuta's and his insane mastery of Jujutsu overall. So the question is, could Megumi even replicate something close to this? Well, let's take a look at his potential. Megumi from the time of the Goodwill arc, which the manga says was in September of 2018, to the time of the Reggie fight in the Culling games, which was in December, went from getting blitzed and destroyed by Todo to being able to do an incomplete domain expansion, summon Max Elephant and many other Shikigami in the same day, and showed a lot of relativity to Maki and Yuji in combat in their own respective arcs. And I know there's not much evidence for this, but I think narrative wise, he should be relative to Yuji early on in the Culling games, at least considering how Megumi could keep up with Yuji at the start of Shibuya, and those two were always portrayed as relative in combat from the moment they met all the way up to the Culling games, so I think there is a narrative argument to be made bare minimum. This would mean in only 3 months time, Megumi accomplished all this just by a mere mindset shift and expanding his imagination. He also became the first year student to learn a domain expansion faster than even Gojo learned his. The guy who Gege says himself can do anything he tries. And not only did Gojo say he has more potential than Yuji, and that there was a 10 Shadows user who could still made a 6 Eyes Limitless user in the past, but Sukuna himself also took so much interest in Megumi that he spared Megumi's life multiple times to get a chance to have the 10 Shadows because of the potential he saw in it, and that was before he even learned about Mahoraga. Now the question is though, what if Megumi got more time to expand his control over his technique? What could he do? Well, to start off, I think he would eventually tame the rest of his Shikigami like Round Deer, Piercing Ox, and Tiger Funeral, the 3 besides Mahoraga that we didn't see him use yet. Round Deer would give him a level of RCT which would be very useful in battle, and Piercing Ox would give him a way to damage people with high levels of durability. Speaking of Mahoraga though, I think Megumi would probably still have a hard time taming it, as he'd have to find a way to one-shot it. This is even if he can tame it, because Mahoraga did get destroyed during the gojo fight. Some people seem to think that Mahoraga can't be summoned anymore because it died already, but some think that it was just Sukuna's version of Mahoraga, so Megumi should get his own, since every 10 Shadows user gets their own Shikigami. Whichever the case though, Megumi does have a chance to get Mahoraga or its abilities either way, because on one hand he could just tame it by himself eventually, and on the other hand he could transfer its powers and abilities into another Shikigami. If this happened though, how could he tame it, you ask? Well, Megumi's physical abilities have never been lackluster, and if anything he's very good at hand-to-hand combat for a 10 Shadows user, considering even Sukuna complements his close range fighting ability. He should also eventually be relative to the heavy hitters like Yuji, Yuta, Maki, and Akari, just considering how he was already reaching into that realm with Yuji before he got his body snatched. Now, not only does he have his own techniques, but he also eventually develops Sukuna's techniques as well, just like Yuji. This meaning in time, he'll learn Cleave and Dismantle, but also he'll have a lot easier time learning things like RCT, Domain Amplification, and Simple Domain. We know this because Kusakabe tells Yuji that the reason he's developing so fast as a sorcerer is because Sukuna used high-level Jujutsu in Yuji's body, so his body started to remember it like muscle memory in sports. For Megumi though, this should be taken to a higher degree when you look at just how many times Sukuna uses Domain Amplification, RCT, and many other high-level techniques in Megumi's body compared to Yuji's. That being said, whenever Megumi gets all his techniques and sped up progression his body should get from Sukuna, along with his natural talent, he should develop into an absolute demon within just a few years' time, or even less depending on his willingness to learn and grow. So by the time Megumi is a 3rd or 4th year student in Jujutsu High, we could be looking at someone with RCT, Simple Domain, Mastery over all the 10 Shadows, a complete domain, as well as Cleave, Dismantle, and Domain Amplification. And on top of all of this, he should be relative to the heavy hitters as far as speed and strength goes. Overall though, I'd say Megumi could become one of the strongest people in Jujutsu Kaisen, just given the time. He had insane potential, and it's really sad we didn't get to see the full extent. If you guys made it to the end of the video, I appreciate it very much, and I once again recommend subscribing because I have many more videos planned for the future. Comment down below what you think about full potential Megumi, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.